So Astrophytum asterius hybrids, those are all from seeds produced in NYC. So then, you know, like these were sown last November, so they're almost 1 year old.
Yeah.
These are maybe coming up on 3 actually. 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And then once they get big enough, they transition to individual pots, and these are like a little bit closer to 4 years.
Okay. Wow. It does take a while.
It takes a while. Hi, my name is Nathan. I live in New York City with my partner and my cat. And together we grow thousands of cacti from seed in a variety of genera. And we grow indoors and outdoors. So we're excited to share our enthusiasm for these plants. My partner had been into it a couple years before. She was in the process of building up a collection. In the city, like we were under lockdown in 2020, we had a couple cacti on the balcony, and you know, prior to this, they were maybe not the happiest. There was always like construction going on. But in that summer, one of the like few good things was that there was a lot less construction, a lot less pollution, and the plants bloomed. And that was when I did my first like cacti pollination, and basically it kind of just took off from there.
Wow, most people take years to get into pollination, but you jumped right into it.
I guess I have a science background. I spent like a lot of time in a lab doing experiments. Maybe the sort of hands-on nature of actually experimenting with plants as opposed to just collecting them as objects, it appealed to me more. I do research related to like semiconductor manufacturing.
Okay.
Not directly related to, let's say, biology, but there are principles of the scientific method in terms of, you know, setting out to answer like a question that you might have and either confirm or disprove what you think is going on. It also lends itself to being kind of meticulous of like recording observations and not taking for granted that anything is just random, basically. And I think it's opened up a lot of connections with other people in the community as well.
What is a cactus? How would you define one?
It's a plant in this family, Cactaceae. They're plants that evolved in the New World. Like most of the species grow in the Americas, with the exception of, I think, Ripsalis bachifera, which is like the one cactus that occurs naturally. It occurs in like Africa, parts of Asia as well. It's a succulent plant that has basically come up with several evolutionary adaptations to survive periods of drought.
Maybe as a reminder too that a lot of cactus, they look the way they do today because of adaptation to their environment. So every single part of their body has a purpose.
Originally, they were in probably a forested environment, and then as the climate changed and water became more scarce, they started making these adaptations to survive. And then from there, they evolved into these forms. Typically, a lot of succulents evolve into these globose forms to minimize the surface area that the plant will like lose water from. Like the adaptations like pleated ribs, tubercles that allow them to expand with taking in water without bursting. The vascular bundles in the cortex that actually allow them to just continue reaching these sizes.
Why should people grow cacti?
It really is like the wonder of nature that produced something like this. I would say now that we're all like maybe a little more conscious about the changing effects of climate, they can tolerate like periods without water. So in terms of reducing like water consumption, like keeping a xeric garden or a succulent garden, that can be one positive thing. They also produce quite spectacular flowers. The other thing is because they're slow growing, they don't like expand and take over your space quite as much. It's funny that I'm saying this because I look at this pot and I think, oh my gosh, like in a year or two, this will literally be like a tray.
So I've only gone to succulents recently, cacti succulent. They're actually quite ornate. And if you give them the right pot, the right pairing, they could really elevate your mood. They're very soothing to look at.
Yes, there is something like almost architectural. Like, I mean, nature has a lot of these like symmetries in them.
Yeah.
And then when you see like the contrast of like a spine color, or even some of the cacti with different color, like epidermis, like not just green, like blue,
Yeah.
purple.
What is like the one way that you don't kill a cactus, a surefire way you don't kill a cactus, starting with light?
So one of the common issues with cacti is lack of light, and that leads to something called etiolation, where instead of keeping, like, let's say, the tight form, it tends to grow tall. It's reaching for the light. While etiolation is not killing your cactus, it does detract from the desired form. Probably the most common way of people kill cacti is by overwatering. What I would say is the most foolproof way of figuring out watering is actually weight. When the soil has completely dried out, you can actually tell how light it is. Whereas it might look dry on top, but there is water still in the pot below that you might not just see. So if you go based entirely on, okay, the top looks dry, I'm gonna water it, that sometimes can lead to overwatering. It's fine to water through the pot, but it's important to let it dry out between watering. What I will say with seedlings is that they are more prone to drying out than adult plants. So your seedlings can actually probably take more water than you think. I would say as my plants get older, I tend to reduce the frequency of the water, because if you think of succulents, right, they store water so that they have it in hard times. And the older and bigger the plant is, the more water it's stored, so the more it can survive the hard time. Whereas a 3-month-old plant, that's still very young, and it's trying to like take up the water so that it has it for later. Potting mediums. You talk to 10 cacti enthusiasts and you'll probably get like 15 recommendations on potting medium. This kind of goes back to starting from seed. Because of the fact that humidity is important to get the germination, I tend to use a very organic mix to start my germination. And then my rule of thumb is that as I upsize, I will introduce maybe more mineral elements to it. I think as you go deeper into the hobby and you learn about certain species that maybe grow entirely in like calcareous soils, like soils with like a high concentration of limestone or pH, you may want to experiment with adding that soil and seeing whether it does well or not. But in general, it's just important to have like a well-draining mix. From that perspective, having some kind of rock inorganic material to just not allow it to become super compressed, I think helps.
So in general, are they light feeders or heavy feeder?
With the fertilizer, if you look at the habitats that they evolved in, because we're talking like semi-desert or at least arid environments, I would say like they're not necessarily programmed to take in large amounts of fertilizer naturally. I was watching actually a video with this grower in Thailand where he mentioned that the more fertilizer you give it, the more water it wants. And so it might be hard to strike a balance in terms of dealing with that desire. Like the growth pattern may not be what you want. But this kind of comes back to observing the plant and deciding what is the form like you want to see.
For pests, what are some of your common pest pressures and how bad are they?
Spider mites are the worst one. This is where like being vigilant or like paying attention, because like usually by the time you actually notice visible scarring, it's like a sign that they've really gone for it. You know, if you're really like looking at them very, very closely and you notice like some little movement, if you can nip it in the bud early, that correlates a better chance. Mealy bugs, we have had some issues, not quite as much. That, yeah, one advantage to being outside, if you have an outdoor space, just the fresh air, that circulation, I think, does contribute to reducing the idea that some insects will like set up home. Indoors, right now I try to use like a fan at some point to improve the circulation, or in the warmer months, I'll like crack the windows open so that there's like some airflow. So airflow is definitely something that's important and overlooked, and airflow also promotes the evaporation of water. So if you're worried about your plant maybe getting waterlogged or the water is not evaporating naturally fast enough, like some airflow can also help you in that situation.
See, so I do see that a lot of your cacti here are grown in like not exactly desert-like conditions. You have, I would say, a bright indirect light. Of course, it's a cloudy day out today, so we're not going to see the best sunlight, but you're south-facing. So what is your tip on growing cacti in a condition that is not like partial shade or not even in full sun?
When people think of cactus in the United States, the hotbeds are really like the Southwest, Southern California, Nevada, Texas, Arizona. What you'll find is that if you look up a solar radiation map of the United States, those places just get a lot more sunlight than, let's say, the Northeast. In addition to other seasonal differences, let's say, in terms of whether you can acclimate a plant that's used to getting twice as much sun to here, I would say that's the kind of hit or miss part. There just isn't that much you can control about the climate. I saw that, like Thailand, very different than the Southwest United States, like more humid. This was like a hotbed of growing cactus. Or the Japanese who created many of these cultivars, Japan is not necessarily like a place that you would say is the native habitat of cacti. So it meant that it's possible to adapt these plants to your conditions. And I think to do that, you want to get them started as young as possible. And for cacti, that basically entails growing from seed. There are some that clump and you can vegetatively propagate for sure. But growing from seed is basically what I've found the most success with when it comes to the plants that we have. And it's not necessarily that they have to be getting like the most direct light. I think many people who've grown from seed have noticed if you go too hard on the light, like you do start seeing like the stress happens. If you're growing the plants, like you kind of want to be in touch with the signs that the plant is doing well. Depending on the light you have, you can kind of see like, how is each plant reacting to this? We start a lot of the things indoors so they don't get any UV whatsoever because they're behind the window. And then as we transition to maybe move them outside when they get a bit bigger, we will sort of acclimate them by shading them. You'd be surprised maybe how well the plants react, even not with like the most intense light, especially when they're very young. Many of these species are not like frost tolerant. I do have plants in an outdoor space, like on a balcony. These plants will have to go inside for the winter. Airflow is important. So it is a challenge in the winter if you have like this collection. To be honest, I would say with growing plants from seed or having smaller plants, it's at least a little bit manageable to bring in. I've met collectors in other parts of New York, like in Long Island, who have these like massive like specimens that are outside, and then they have to like bring this thing into their house, and it gets over. It reaches a point where you just can't do it anymore, basically. The other challenge I would say is I recognize that I'm in a very kind of fortunate situation, like south exposure, where we are, it's like the light is not really obstructed by other buildings. So I understand that there are people that are pursuing more grow light setups. For instance, that's something you'll have to navigate, like figuring out the distance of your grow lights to the plants and other things. There are challenges. You could say that our growing season maybe is like a bit shorter. You might be on Instagram looking at people in California and being like, why can't my plants look exactly like that? What I would say is just be patient, because it's true that they're slow growing, but you might look back in 6 years and be like, wow, this plant actually grew a lot more than I thought. You maybe don't see that like that progress like as quickly as you might want to.
Would you recommend everyone to try to grow them from seed? And what are some of the pros and cons?
I would definitely recommend it. It does require patience. So let's start with some cons. Like it does take longer. It does require you to maybe give a little bit more attention at certain stages, because you get something like a fungal outbreak or something, it can wipe out the whole tray of seeds. So these are frustrations that you have to deal with. The pros is that seeds are cheaper than buying individual plants. Personally, I've found that going like one level above that, it's like if you can get like a couple adult plants to flower and you can actually pollinate them yourself, the seeds that come out of these conditions tend to be like some of the most robust ones, basically. It's like if the plant is happy enough to bloom in your conditions, chances are its descendants might also enjoy that. The other thing is we can talk about more depending on the type of cactus. You have the potential to create some interesting hybrids. I think many people who are into cactus who are aware of Astrophytum will know that that's a genus that lends itself very well to creating new and interesting things. I would say like what gives me the most satisfaction and why I think I've been able to maintain enthusiasm is seeing that progression from something that's very nondescript, like a very tiny green blob, and then having it turn into the plant that you can recognize. Correlated to that is actually when you grow from seed, you will become better at identifying cacti because you will see like when they're younger what they look like, and then you'll start to make connections with other things. So just getting more involved in the plant life cycle. A lot of people eventually get there. I would kind of just say like, why wait? Sometimes you just have to find the plant that speaks to you to get you into doing that.
You know, you only started in 2020 and you've already started pollinating them. Would you say pollination for these are easy to figure out, or is it super hard?
It's not that hard. So the cactus that I started with was Astrophytum myriostigma. I would say Astrophytums from pollination to producing the seed is approximately 30 days or 3 weeks. So it's actually pretty fast. Some other cacti, it takes longer. As you go further in the rabbit hole, you'll learn about certain species that are, for instance, like they're called cryptocarpic. So what that means is that they actually keep the fruit inside their body. It doesn't get released basically until the plant dies. There are like many different adaptations, but pollination, yeah. So I would say it really depends on which cactus. There is information out there on how long it takes, and the process itself is, I would say, not difficult.
Okay, and I'm actually in the process of sprouting some from seed myself. The success rate is actually quite high.
Yes.
And it is faster than you thought, but a bit slower than your tropicals.
Yes.
So it's kind of in between.
One thing I would say is that the growth is not necessarily completely linear, as in I feel for a lot of people I've talked to growing from seed, they tend to mention some difficulties in like maybe the first year, or like, oh, I got them to a certain size and then I repotted them and they died or something happened. But what I would say is that for me, especially with Astrophytum, I found like once they pass like the 2 or 3 year mark, like you might lose some in that mode. Once they turn that corner, I feel like you can really see the growth maybe more, as opposed to you germinate them and you're like, oh, it's very cute, but it still doesn't look like they're getting like the features. And then it's like one day it clicks and you're like, okay, the plant made it this far and it's like hitting its stride basically.
And when you're growing from seeds, the siblings would have slightly different features one from another. Would you be selecting some of the traits?
Yes. So we didn't start off with like a ton of mother plants, like if I'm being honest. So we pollinate mostly just based on luck, like what is blooming at the same time. It so happens that if you have plants with very disparate features, like maybe you have one that has like flatter shape, and I'm talking about like Astrophytum here. As long as you're good with documenting like what the cross was, you can maybe decide to make selections based on your own aesthetic preference, like maybe you want the flat shape or you want something with more flex. I've been reading like in the cultivar world, the Japanese consider like a trait to be fixed if more than 50% of the offspring have like that particular phenotype.
Oh.
So in other words, I can show you like a cross between 2 plants and you can see that there's nothing that's 50%. Like there's a lot of like variation. So if you really want to get to that level, like multiple generations, and that's where grafting comes in to accelerate things, which we also do some of, but yeah.
For you, is it easy to find seeds around here?
If you have like a local cactus and succulent society, the chances are that you will meet like people who have learned about where to get seeds from, or they are producing seeds from their own plant. And then that can be like a great source, particularly as we talked about like the conditions. Like, if someone has like plants that are blooming here and producing seeds, you might have a better shot with this as opposed to getting seeds from like a far off place that maybe you're not sure. It is true that today we can be overwhelmed with information, people saying like, oh, you should get seeds from this guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to like meet someone in person and just get some seeds from them.
Now, I've been to the Thailand shows and cacti are a lot more colorful there. There's a lot of variegations and I don't see that a lot here. So is this something that you guys here in the United States?
We talked about how variegated plants, even for cacti in general, right? Because we're talking about plants that have some, let's say, deficiency in chlorophyll, that they can be like trickier to grow. It might just be that someone hasn't got it into their head, like I'm setting a goal to like grow specifically like the variegated gymnocalycium or the variegated astrophytum. I think also maybe Thailand, you have people that have been doing this for like quite some time. There's a bigger pool of like strong like parent plants to like buy and maybe start your own breeding program or experiments with. So Astrophytum asterius hybrids, those are all from seeds produced in NYC. So then, you know, like these were sown last November, so they're almost 1 year old.
Yeah.
These are maybe coming up on 3 actually. 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And then once they get big enough, they transition to individual pots, and these are like a little bit closer to 4 years.
Okay, wow. It does take a while.
It takes a while. Depends on the seed. So for instance, these are also 4, like these ones. And these actually flowered already and produced seed.
Yeah. Someone wants to say hi. You tugged at my shirt. That's so cute. Not many cats are this affectionate, so this is cute. So yeah, you said 4 years.
4 years. So these are some of the oldest myriostigma hybrids that we've grown from seed. The seeds are from a vendor, Roman Pavlika in the Czech Republic. He's been since like 2008. He's like really worked with the Japanese growers to like have mother plants, and he wants to kind of stabilize like the lines of these plants. So his seed quality is like very, very good. This is like some seedlings of the Copiapoa, Mammillaria. This is Ancestral cactus, but don't worry. And this is like a flowering Weingartia, also known as Rebutia. We have this is the Cactus I talked about. This is a Ferrocactus.
Ferrocactus.
Ferrocactus. These gymnocalyciums are the babies from this.
Now, when you say babies, these offsets, you just kind of pluck them off, or do you cut them?
No. Actually, I pollinated it with the plant that has the 2 fruits. So
those the fruits?
Yes.
Those are the fruits.
Yes.
That's funny. I've never seen these.
Yes. So right now they're green. As they ripen, they turn darker in color, and then there'll be seeds inside. Gymnos produce like a lot of seeds. So yeah.
So these are the babies. How old are they approximately?
These are maybe, I would say 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then, you know, for instance, like they're not the same species, but these are baby Ferrocactus. So like you can say that like when something like this will grow into something that looks like this.
It's not, the babies are not symmetrical at all, but they eventually...
Yes. With the Ferros, as they get bigger, they eventually develop kind of like regular ribs. Whereas, and like you're saying, when they're babies, they're not symmetric, but then these are the Cacti. The tubercles will never converge into like just straight ribbed.
Can you define a tubercle? What is a tubercle?
Oh, so the tubercle is like the division. It's like the segmenting of the rib, which I think is like also a feature that allows it maybe to expand, have volume changes in the rib of the plant. So for instance, some cacti like this Astrophytum asterius, like the rib, there are no tubercles. It's just it's kind of like just a straight line. But then, there are cultivars like this. This is what we call like the Kiko. It's the same plant, but now you can see that the rib is splitting into like these.
Are you talking about these things that go in and out, like the?
Yeah, like more like this, like how there's like
Yeah, almost like, is it like ridges?
ridges. yes, exactly. Ridges.
Okay, so when you say tubercles, you mean the ridges.
Ridges on the ribs, but like they're like more, even more discrete features, I guess, than just like a ridge.
Okay. And for you audiences to know, we filmed a bit early, but now the sun is coming out. So you see that's the east side on that side. So you see the streak of light coming here. So I guess as the day progresses, this will get fantastic light.
Yes. The Astrophytum myriostigma. And I crossed it actually with this one.
And is that an astrophyte?
Yes, it is an Astrophytum myriostigma, but we call this like the trichostatum because it has 3 main ribs instead of the 5.
Oh.
And also we call this nudum form, so it doesn't have the flecks on the skin that this one has, which are just like tiny hairs actually.
Yeah.
So what's funny is that when I cross those 2 plants, this is one of the the children, and it actually has like a division of like bands.
It is exactly like a
like it's like a split.
Oh yeah, 50-50.
50-50 split, but not all of them are like that.
Question, there are some of these that were grown on the window.
Yes.
Like strapped onto the window itself. Are these like VIP plants or what?
So yes, if you're on the window, you're getting
better light.
the most light, and same goes for like the ones that are like right here. These are like kind of like the Astrophytum hybrids. What you're looking at there is grafts from the 2023 pollination season. So all of the like things there were seeds produced in 2023, and now I'm grafting them to sort of accelerate the process.
Well, are these like rare or?
They're produced in such quantity that I might not necessarily say that any one is rare. But the thing is that as they grow bigger, the forms just develop, and you might not be able to necessarily predict what one thing is like really going to look like.
Yeah.
So you never know what you might end up with, basically.
Yeah, a lot of these are quite funky. And for these unusual growth parts here, there's something that are you guys prized for, or?
So I would say it's an aesthetic thing. So that, I think what you're referring to is what we call like the interstitial rib growth, which in Japanese they call it fukuryu. Exactly. Like, so actually that entire tray, they all have the interstitial rib growth, but if you were to look at them more closely, you would see some like differences. Like basically the pattern is not set in stone, like there's genetic variation from plant to plant, so you just will see how the ribs grow out. So for instance, like on this particular plant, it has the rib growth, but it does not have trichomes on any other part of the body. So you get this almost like drawing effect or like line effect of like painting on the skin of the plant, where it's defined like in that way. And that's like something that's prized. Like you can see, for instance, like, the growth of trichomes only on the extra growths and not on the body of the plant. And then as the plant gets bigger, it just becomes like more pronounced.
And this is a result of hybridization.
This is a result of hybridization. You can also find ones where it's developing like the solid band, but it has trichomes on the main body. But there's something about the contrast when it's completely deficient and then you only have it like on the rib line. So this plant, you can see it has this purple coloration, and there's a big contrast with like the white flecking. Now, one of the parents is actually like this guy, and the mother of this plant had purple skin, but none of its babies actually ended up with the purple skin. But now so now this is like one more generation, and some have like started having this treatment.
Oh, so it's like it's a skip the generation.
Yeah, so it like skipped a generation. This is also interesting because you might say it looks like it's developing the kind of like the V pattern.
Cute.
And actually, this plant, the parents are this one, which did not have the V, and also one of the grafted one. So the question is, did either of those plants maybe have like a V type in its past, or is the V pattern something that can just be produced randomly?
These are all like tiny baby plants.
Yes, well, I guess that's where the 1,000 number comes from.
You don't sow all of these? Some of them you actually got from other.
No, with very few exceptions, everything here is sown
By yourself?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How do you find time for it? Yeah. They don't really take too much time, do they?
Well, once you get like your germination process down, like they can stay in that same container easily for like a year, right? You just, I mean, you at some point you will release the humidity, but no, gardening takes a lot of work, but I think it's, I don't know, this, it also lights a fire under you, I think, to see where things are going, like how things can improve. Everything in this pot is a hybrid from, I crossed this plant and this plant.
Okay.
And you can see that, you know, you have things that are devoid of the trichomes. There are things that have like a lot more.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that's like 50%.
Oh yeah.
So basically, if you want now to like say, you know, for instance, like this one is actually kind of special because the areoles are very close together, and it has no trichome as far as I can tell on other parts. So I might want to say, okay, maybe I want to see how can I produce something that looks similar to this, and then the others I might, you know, decide to whatever, sell or bring to a meeting to trade or something like this.
Now, if you want to keep this pure, can you cross it? You cannot do it with itself, right?
No, you would have to pick something. You would have to pick something maybe similar, or you know, you could cross it with something else and just say, maybe I want to like combine a trait. So what I guess what I mean by that is like, you know, maybe I wanted it purple.
Okay.
Maybe I would try to cross it with something that had like a purple parent. So actually, you know, like this plant is like what we would call Astrophytum asterius, like star shape, because you can see it's not perfectly circular, right? Like it's developing this shape. This guy, grafted one here, is one of its children, but I crossed it with a purple parent, and now you have like the star shape, but it's purple.
You do see, especially in the, what do you call it, in the deeper parts.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, I think it's your imagination slash
determination
determination with what you have to be like, well, you know, like, right, like we saw that other plant where it's like the contrast of white is much more intense on purple than, let's say, on green. So maybe I decided that this is something I can work with. This gene seems like it's like kind of, you know, strong.
So this is a ladybug, and it's actually beneficial. It eats.
Yes, so that might tell me that maybe there are a couple unwanted guys living in that planter, but now I have the ladybug to hopefully manage the population.
Do you release it here, or does it come on it?
You know, to be honest, I think I got it at a recent show and sale event. Like it might have ended up on the plants and then found its way back here. Another advantage to growing from seed is that if you buy plants, collectors are not necessarily going to sell you like their best plants.
Yeah.
But if you have a collector who's also really into growing from seed and producing, you can bet that from his mother plants, you're going to end up with some very like interesting things.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, like, right, if I wanted to procure like a, four-headed ornatum fukuryu, like that one, I might be searching for a long time.
Yeah.
But I sowed a bunch of seeds, and honestly, there are even like multiple ones that have like many heads or things like this. So
Interesting.
so this is a Gymnocalycium flansii seedling.
Okay.
This is a bigger version.
Oh my gosh.
And this is what that plant. So we didn't grow this plant from seed.
Okay.
It's from an older grower in Long Island.
Yeah.
But basically, you can kind of maybe see like what
How long does it take from like 10 years?
I mean, I would say this plant is at least 10 to 15, maybe between 10 and 15 years old. So this plant is more like 5. So we'll see. These are like these small blue columnar cacti.
They are very blue.
Yes. And to your left is what they look like
They're younger.
bigger.
Bigger or younger?
Like this.
Oh, this one.
Yes.
Okay.
So these are also from seed, maybe 6 years old.
Okay.
But yeah, you can see them putting on a lot of size compared to the small ones. Those are some astrophytum hybrids that, compared to the ones that were indoors all the time, we decided to put these outside to maybe get some exposure to sun and see if that really changes the growth pattern. They seem to be doing pretty well, so.
Are these all like accidental, or did you put them on purpose
No, I put it on purpose.
just to have a friend?
Yeah. It's like when you maybe don't want to like create a brand new pot and you're like, okay, like,
Stick it there.
yeah, stick it in there. So
All right, Nathan, thank you so much for showing us around.
it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for your time. And I hope this can inspire more people to get into cacti.
And of course, Nathan's Instagram is going to be somewhere on the screen right here. And I want to wish everyone a good day ahead. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching this all the way to the very end. I'm your host, Sean, and you can keep in touch with me on my Instagram, which is up on the screen. I apologize for being away for so long, but this episode took a few weeks to edit due to complexity and my determination to deliver the highest quality possible. If you appreciate my hard work and its impact on the international plant community, and is somehow doing well in this crazy economy, please do consider doing small monthly donations. To join as a YouTube member, simply open any OnlyPlants episode from a computer browser, and next to my channel name there will be a join button. You may also join as a Patreon at patreon.com/SeanFromOnlyPlants. For the rest of you, simply by watching this all the way to the very end, smashing that like button and commenting really helps the channel out tremendously. For that, I thank you and I see you in the next one. Bye!